On this episode of Something to Talk About, we spend some time with Rick Castro, a local artist. We talk about the high interest in the arts on Guam and the tastes of art collectors who actually have the money to buy them. That's all ahead on Something to Talk About. Welcome to Something to Talk About. Thank you for joining us again. Here we are at King's Restaurant in Tamuning, and we've got quite the spread. It's our usual fruit and the chaser platter. This is like the most requested for item, especially when we're here. It's the dried beef, and I think they've got the lumpia and Jesus and finadeni and kelaguen. You know what the chaser platter is. I am here today, a really interesting guy, I think. We are here with Rick Castro, professor at the University of Guam, right? Professor of Finer Arts, and a local artist whose works are very much celebrated and appreciated in Guam. Well, we'll talk about that because you showed me some of the stuff. But thanks for coming in, and thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Talk to me about what you do at the University of Guam, first of all.
Basically, I teach most of the studio classes in the visual arts department. Painting is the main subject that I cover. I also do drawing. I used to do printmaking. We got a new professor that covers that now. And a lot of the studio for non-majors courses for just about all the disciplines come through me.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So do you have a big student population, a big class population?
I do. The art majors themselves are comprised of maybe about between 25 and 30 per academic year. But the number of students that I actually teach in the studio classes number from between 80 and 100.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's every semester for 15 years.
It has
it's never gone down.
I'm impressed. So
yeah,
those numbers have always been pretty consistent then.
It is. When you teach a hands-on studio course, we're tasked to teach at least 3 studios a day. But I think I do an average of 4. I managed to do 4 with one overload. And I teach an average of 5 every semester.
Oh my
classes.
Gosh.
So it's a lot.
So tell me what that's like. I mean, what's the difference between studio class as opposed to what?
Well, the difference is the studio courses are basically hands-on, and the lecture courses really are more in tune with art history and the philosophy of the arts, survey of the arts. More academic oriented, where the hands-on studio courses, the students are actually getting their hands dirty and experiencing the studio techniques.
Okay, and so which one did most kids or most students, do they prefer one or the other?
We have probably the biggest discipline in the fine arts in comparison to the other departments. There always seems to be a good number of visual artists or people that are interested in the visual arts, whether you want to be a sculptor, a printmaker, or a painter. So we've never had the numbers go down in terms of that, but we do have a lot of theater majors and music majors also that cross over and try out some of our classes too.
Wow. What is the interest? I mean, you said 15 years and you've had a consistent class population. What is the interest, and does it appear to be growing to you?
It does. It appears to be growing and expanding, and recently with exhibits like the annual GAX exhibit, which is being held in the Hotel Row, I'm starting to see some of my graduates getting out there and exposing themselves with their new works and different mediums. And what's really nice about that, as emerging artists, they're starting to really showcase different styles that have been affecting been affected by their environment as far as being an urban community now, and getting that influence from the States and off the internet.
So what they're doing is they're doing local perception, local art,
Yes.
sort of, and
Yes.
with the mainland influence,
With the mainland influence, you
like
know,
as a methodology. You mean
well,
the-
it's the world has gotten so much more global, and you know, I remember.
oh look,
Wow.
parrotfish.
Yeah, I
keep
remember
talking, yeah.
10 years ago, you know, someone was asking me, you know, for our references, for instance, what the students use to paint from as far as pictures are concerned. 10 years ago, my students were coming in with magazines and library books, you know, and getting all their references from that. Now today, it's not unusual to see them whip out an iPhone 6 and pop up the Wi-Fi and just Google landscape, and there they are, they're working off their electronic devices and doing paintings from the palm of their hand. So
You mean like
it's
sort
really
of
changed.
freehanding what they're seeing?
Well, just having instant access to,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
anything as far as resources are concerned.
Yeah.
It's no longer like, oh, wow, it has to be an island scene from Epau Beach. You know, you can Google Canada and a lake comes up.
Yeah.
So it's just the fact that they can do that has really exposed them to a wider arena of influences.
So then let's go back to you. When you started, you must have been a child interested in drawing? Was that? Tell me your backstory.
My backstory was everybody knows my older brother Ron, and I when I was a kid I used to
I don't even know
idolize
how
him.
I would have even confused the two of you, really.
It's a joke between us. Whenever I introduce myself to people on Guam now, I said, "Hi, I'm Rick, Ron's brother," and he does the same. Because it was like that. Like
When is he much older than you? Or?
we're both artists,
Okay,
so it's
yeah.
easy to confuse us. And we had at some point we had to make a deal. We were both signing our names R. Castro, and we had to sit down and say, "Look, who gets
Did you arm wrestle or did you flip a coin?
It was like we came into a consensus that I would use Rick and he would use Ron, and we'd have to spell it out. That was our deal.
Oh, that's funny.
And so both of us stopped using R. Castro. And but if luck would put it, I found out actually later on that there was another Rick Castro that actually did art, and he ended up being a professor up at the university, a librarian, and who did art on the side. And so when people started to confuse me with him, I dropped the K from my Rick and just used the C.
RIC.
Yeah, and that was
that's
like,
why
that was
it's
like,
RIC.
Yeah, and that
Okay.
was 20 years ago. And it was funny, ironically, when I came back to work for the university, I found him up at the library. And so we call each other brother. And but
Look,
anyways.
our king sign is falling down. We have to sit up there, brother.
Yeah.
Right there. Okay. So
But yeah, that's my story. Is I sort of followed my big brother's footsteps. He won a scholarship to the Art Institute, and I followed suit. Like right after he went to school, he came back. I always wanted to be an artist, but I didn't realize that the Art Institute was a commercial art school.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, I said, you know, where are the paintbrushes and stuff? And we're doing mostly commercial art. So I found out too late that it was more of a visual communications type of institute. And went through the program, came out, was a commercial artist for about maybe 6 years. And as luck would have it, I was fortunate to win what's called an Inter-Pacific Fellows Scholarship, which allowed me to pick any school across the nation to attend. And that was, at the time, I was a creative director for Micronesia Mall, working for Phil Shiragi. And I went up to Phil and I said, look, I hate to break this to you, but I know I just started and it's been less than a year, but I just won a scholarship and I have a chance to pursue my dream, which was to go back to art school and become a fine artist. And he thought I was crazy, you know. He says, what, is it the money? And I said, no, this is just a dream that I had. And so, you know, he let me go. I wanted to get as far away from Guam as possible, so I chose the East Coast. And to become a painter, a classical painter, you know, I did my research and I found this one school I was interested in called the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, which ended up being the oldest art school in the nation and the first art museum ever in the United States. So I figured if I wanted to learn how to paint in the classical style, that would be the place to go. And so I shot out there to the East Coast, and I was there for 8 years straight,
Oh my
pursuing my
gosh.
degrees. And by the time I was done,
What did you get your degree in?
I had basically, I wanted to be a painter, a pure painter, and so it was a classical school that gave out what's called a 4-year certificate in classical painting, and I ended up minoring in printmaking and majoring in painting. But I figured, you know, when I got there, I had mentors that were full-time professors that were just scraping by, and then I realized, gosh, these guys have pieces at the Metropolitan and some major museums, but they still had to work. I'm probably not going to survive purely as a fine artist, so I decided, you know what, I better get my undergrad also. So I applied to Penn, University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, got in, and pursued my undergrad. So I was going in two different directions simultaneously.
Wow.
And after completing that program, I figured, you know what, may as well go for the MFA and think about teaching at the university level, and that's what I did.
Wow.
So and here I am.
I'm so impressed. I didn't even know that. I mean, I just
Yeah.
caught you in a bar and I found out all this stuff. I'm just joking. This is Rick with a C and not the K, and he's a Castro. We're going to take a break here. We come back. I'm going to delve into a few more things about art on Guam
Sure.
and some of the pieces
some of
that
your
he's
food.
made, and eat some of his food. Yeah, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Something to Talk About. And with me today, Rick Castro is a professor of fine arts at the University of Guam. He's also a local. Do you just say local painter, or do you look at artist? Does it make a difference to artists
Yeah,
that it's?
I'm proud to be a Chamorro artist, and when people ask me, you know, what do you do? I usually tell them I'm an artist before I even tell them I'm a professor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's far more sexy. At least far more sexy. All right, I wanted to go back because I asked you how you kind of got your start, and you started off, you know, as an adult male. I wanted to know, when you were a child, though, were you, you know, the kid that walked around with this, you know, with a sketchbook, or?
It was funny. I think it was in the third grade where, you know, at the time in Spain, I was a military brat, and we were all there and going to school in Madrid. My school had an art contest. It was for a dentist, and I won in my class. I was the winner, and in fact, I think it was for the whole school. And that was like the first thing I ever got attention for, was winning a drawing contest for art. And that was a time where my brother just recently won a scholarship to go to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh.
Wow.
And so, you know, idolizing my brother and seeing that I had a little bit of talent myself, from that day on, throughout elementary school, I became the go-to guy for all the classmates. So, let's get Rick to draw it. You know?
Yeah. But
So-
that's interesting, though, because before you won this contest, did you also know how? Were you interested, or did you dabble? Did you
I dabbled.
write on the wall?
I was
or?
this kid that loved to doodle. I was into adventure. I would draw superheroes, and I had to do it in secret. I mean, that was the
Wow.
thing. I don't know why, but I always had to have this little invisible corner of the house that
Are
I
you
had
a
to.
shy guy
I
normally?
had
Is
to
that what it is?
escape. I had to escape to it, and I was in my own little world, and I would literally draw like these entire fantasy worlds of soldiers and knights and you know, I was a big comic book fan at the same time.
Wow,
So it was
amazing.
one of those things where I was just really into my own little fantasy world, and I had to express it visually on paper so that it was real to me and it was not just up here.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you know, I just kind of followed that.
Well, I mean, you followed it, and you probably reached a place that most people would wonder, why would you even try to come back to Guam? For all of those years that you spent in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
like you said, it was a hop, skip, and a jump to New York, which is the mecca of
Yeah.
art, you know, on the East Coast.
Uh-huh.
you could have branched out, really, couldn't you, to pretty much anything that you wanted to do, especially given what you knew now and how you could apply it to today's technology.
Yes, it was, you know, my professors were all, when I graduated with my master's, they were all mad at me when I said I was going to return to Guam
Yeah.
and teach. At the time, I was gone 10 years from the island. But, you know, I was going home every year for a few weeks just to, during the summertime. So I never lost track of my roots. I still had to return home.
Yeah.
You know, I was sponging off everyone's frequent miles.
Way
You
to
know,
go,
family
Nick.
would
When
chip
you're a
in,
struggling artist, that's what
and they would
happens.
send me a ticket. It was beautiful. And then I'd be back in the big city again.
Yeah.
So I never really lost touch with my roots. And what was unusual about my work was the fact that I was bringing this kind of tropical, primitive type of look to this, you know, this urban concrete jungle. And
They liked it.
they thought it was so crazy, you know, and I was very, very fortunate to be tapping into that as a city dweller and a transplanted islander. So the work kind of stood out
Yeah.
to my mentors, and so when I graduated, the first thing they expected me to do was go to New York
Yeah.
and struggle as an emerging artist, and when I broke it to them that there was an opening at the university, at the time I went back for the summer, I met with Joe Babalta.
Oh, wow.
And he just latched onto me when he heard I was in an MFA program. He said, dude, you got to come back home. And I said, why? And he said, we have one of our faculty members who's ready to retire, and he's been there for 30-some years. And I said, really? You know, because I knew getting a teaching job at the university level was really one of the hardest things to achieve,
What
because
an accomplishment. Right?
you either have to, someone has to step down, they create a new position, or someone, you know, just dies on you.
Yeah,
And then
right,
there's
right.
an opening.
It's
you
hard
know.
to get in.
Those guys are pretty much, and that's anywhere, any institution. It's really hard to get into a tenure track fine arts position.
But at the same time that you wanted to, you know, that you decided that you were going to come back to Guam, you ran away from Guam. You wanted to
I
spend
did.
so much time. You said you wanted to get as far away from Guam as you possibly could.
I did. When they said I could choose any school I wanted with this full scholarship, I wanted to get as far away from Guam as possible, on U.S. soil, though. You know, I didn't want to go to Europe where I couldn't talk to anyone.
I don't want to go to Timbuktu or
Yes,
anything. Okay.
but, you know, because I had a lot of family on the West Coast, and I figured, you know, if this is going to be, if I'm going to do this, I got to go all the way.
Oh, so the reason why you wanted to stay away from family was because of distraction? Or was it...
I wanted to get out of my comfort zone, basically, and really experience something new. And so when I chose the Pennsylvania Academy, I thought, you know, I really wanted to be a painter. This is my chance, and I took it. And so I was there after 6 years. When I graduated with my undergrad degree, I won a travel fellowship on top of that, and it was another opportunity to, and basically it was called the Ware Fellowship, and it allowed me to backpack across Europe for 2 straight months.
Oh my gosh, that's my bucket list. I should have done that,
So when I did that, that's when I really, really knew that I was going to
arrived?
I was going to be a fine artist for
Isn't
life.
that cool, though?
Yes. And
Is it because you had looked, you'd gone to all the art, across Europe? You went everywhere?
I went everywhere. I must have been in like 4 different Picasso museums.
Oh my God. Is there anything, in any part of Europe, the continent, that turned you on more than any other piece that still to this day you just go, oh my gosh, this is...
Yeah, there was one place, and it's funny because it's a particular artist. I was more of a realist at the time, and I didn't become an abstract painter till later on, but it was, I walked into a gallery in Germany that showcased mostly artwork by a guy named Mark Rothko. And Mark Rothko was an abstract expressionist in color field paintings. And when I walked in there, I stood in front of this Rothko painting, and it was a very, you know, small, very quiet painting, maybe about, you know, 4 by 5 feet, and stood in front of it. And before I knew it, I was being transported, pulled into this painting, and it caught me off guard. So the first thing I did when I got back is I took a train up to New York, and I said I have to see more of this guy and more of the abstract expressionists. And so when I went to the Met, I walked to the contemporary art section, and I saw, you know, these very great-looking artists from South America, like Marta and a few others. But what stunned me was when I stood in front of a Jackson Pollock painting called, I think it was called Autumn Rhythm. And I stood in front of that, and I said, okay, this is another abstract expression. I got to look at this guy. And this is a guy that I looked at in the history books and said, you know, what is this? You know, it's just splatter painting, you know, and it changed my life, because I was looking at this painting, and all of a sudden I felt the hair in the back of my neck stand up, and I got goosebumps, I got chills, and the reason why was I was literally standing inside this painting by an abstract expressionist, and I've been, when I backpacked across Europe, I must have seen maybe about 30 different cathedrals that I walked in. And this was probably the closest to a religious experience I ever had in my life.
So,
it was
so
really
when you're
strange.
looking at, okay, so when those of us without the eye, you know, see the splattered colors
Yes.
on a thing, it's possible to be moved.
It's possible to be
Okay.
moved, and to be moved with a higher power.
Okay, okay.
And that's when I knew
Because
the power
people
of
laugh
art.
at that, you know, they
No,
laugh at that.
They do,
They
and
sort of
it's.
laugh at that. They could,
I was
could
one
be
of
that.
those people that was laughing until I stood in
Until
front
you
of.
stood.
But
But something, there was something about that.
There was.
Let's talk about your art, because a lot of what you're doing is what we see in our natural environment. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm doing a series. I kind of coined the term junglescapes,
Yeah.
because
They're beautiful. Really, they're beautiful.
Thank you. They're landscapes, but they're not your typical landscapes.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, and I almost started this whole series by accident. You know,
Did you stumble on a trail?
I
You stumbled booty stomping and go, oh my
No,
gosh.
actually, it happened.
Because that's what I think of when I see some of your stuff.
Yeah.
It's like I'm in the middle of some place where I just stopped to tie my shoe.
Yes, yes, and you know, I wanted the pieces I wanted to expose people to not just the beauty of the panoramas we have
Right.
here, but what's at your feet.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
you go boonie stomping, you look down at your feet, and you see all this color and texture. And I wanted
And the
people
light
to,
and the-
yeah,
yeah,
I wanted
the water
people
flowing.
like, look, it's not out there, it's right there. You're standing
When I
on
first
it.
saw
Yeah.
when I first saw these pieces, I had that feeling. I was, you know, 17 years
Yeah.
old.
Uh-huh.
I'm stopped for a moment to tie my shoe, and then I'm overtaken by
Yes.
what I'm looking at while I'm
Yeah.
tying my shoe, and that to me was like. I'm looking around going, yeah, the Seti Bay is beautiful, but
Yes.
this is really pretty
Yes.
cool with all these little tadpoles moving. And when I first saw that, that's true. But you're pretty successful at the selling of this art, which is another thing.
The artwork moves. Yeah, it does move. I never worry about having an exhibit and trying to sell out. Normally, I mean, I had one show where I had 40-some works, and not a single piece sold on opening night. And for the duration of the show, it was up for about a month. By the time the show came down, I had like 6 pieces left.
Wow.
So they walk out slowly, and so I don't really try to push
Yeah,
it.
you're not
Yeah.
out there marketing. Let me just ask you this last question, because we gotta close the show. I
Yeah,
didn't realize it
okay,
was closed.
sorry.
No. Do you agree with this local law that we have about investing a portion of the cost of a project
the
to
percent,
local art? Yeah.
the percent for the arts.
Yeah.
I honestly stand behind that emphatically, because you know, one of the things that we forget about is you know, Guam is really in need of artistic venues in terms of galleries. Our museum's finally getting built, but after so many years,
Yeah.
and really artists have not been able to showcase their artistic talents in any venues other than car dealerships, cafes, and restaurants. And so in lieu of that, our only alternative is to really promote and support our local artists in these 200 million entities, where only 1% of that, someone was telling me, like, hey, you know, I had a fellow professor say to me, he's like, wow, I should be an artist too, because, you know, I can get a little piece of that $1.4 million that they're saying is too much to pay to local artists. And I said, look, did you see that little YouTube shot of the potato that someone bought for close to 1.5? And it was a photograph of a potato.
Yeah.
So, you know, and my argument was, I'd rather see 1.5 million go to 100 artists than to some
Person,
individual
yeah.
photographer who took a shot of a potato. and they'll have something to show for that in these places, and there's an integrity to having local art in our local institutions here. It means more, and it's part of the aesthetic of our culture. And when people go to these places, sure, I love Balinese art, but I'd like to see, what this culture is supporting. And
I love it. Absolutely love it. Hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm so glad that I ran into you so that we could have this conversation.
Yes,
because I see your name
anytime.
everywhere and I see your stuff, but I hardly
Yeah.
ever see you in person. So
Yeah.
it's really awesome. Thanks,
Well,
my friend.
thank you.
It's my pleasure.
All right.
All right. That will do it for something to talk about. Don't forget, King's Restaurant, every week we do this with a different guest. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.